In preparing for this particular session, I came across some articles which attempt to define what a secular society is. It turns out to be quite a challenge, and there are quite a few different views as to what a secular society is really all about. One of the authors I came across has attempted to point out that there are different versions of a secular society, particularly as far as the law is concerned. And I refer you now to the back of that handout which I gave you, where it describes 4 ways to define a secular society. Society may be neutral secular, which says this is actually the most extreme one on one side. The state is expressly non-religious and must not support religion in any way. That's what he calls the neutral secular society. The state must be absolutely neutral when it comes to religion. And it is expressly non-religious and does not support religion in any way. Then there is positive secular. The state does not form religious belief of any particular religion, but may create conditions favorable to religions generally. Now, an example of that here in Canada, and I believe it's true in the U.S., is getting tax exemptions for churches and temples and mosques and so forth, making land available for the construction of religious buildings. That would be examples of positive secular. Okay with that? Then we have what he calls negative secular. The state is not competent in matters involving religion, but must not act so as to inhibit religious manifestations that do not threaten the common good. This has been a very difficult one to put into practice, certainly in this country, particularly with respect to the wearing of religious garb. In terms of remember the big debate with the RCMP, in terms of whether Sikhs could wear their traditional headdress and still be members of the RCMP, and that was decided in their favor. So that might be an example of this. There are other examples as well. Then we get on to inclusive secular. The state must not be run or directed by a particular religion, but must act so as to include the widest involvement of different faith groups, including non-religious. For example, this has to do with the presentation or lobbying of the various levels of government by churches and religions on particular matters that they feel are important. And there's one case, this is why I picked this particular article, because it deals with a distinctly Canadian case, and some of you will recall this one. This had to do with the Surrey School Board. There was a movement afoot to include 3 storybooks which featured same-sex parents as educational resource material. Any of you recall that issue? It's fairly recent. 2 teachers, both members of the gay and lesbian educators, applied to have the books approved for use in kindergarten and grade 1. When the Surrey School Board held public hearings on approval, there was substantial opposition from religious leaders and adherents, but also from others with no identified religion. Most of those opposed agreed that the content of the books was controversial, and these issues are more appropriately dealt with at higher grades. The school board voted against approving the books. The 2 teachers, these 2 teachers, and others, applied for judicial review, arguing that the school board based its decision on religious concerns. Now, here's where things really got interesting. The first place this court case went was to the BC Supreme Court. Justice Sanders ruled in the educational setting the term secular excludes religion or religious belief. Further, she added, I conclude that the words conducted on strictly secular principles precludes a decision significantly influenced by religious considerations. That's part of it. In other words, she was overruling the decision of the Surrey School Board. And that is a good example of neutral secular. So she's based on that model of a society, neutral secular, was on your back. Okay? The state is expressly non-religious and does not support religion in any way. So that was kind of the model that she was using in making her decision. Well, needless to say, that decision got appealed. And it went next to the BC Court of Appeal. And they overturned Justice Sanders' position. Justice Mackenzie, she wrote for the unanimous court that to interpret secular as mandating established unbelief rather than simply opposing established belief would effectively ban religion from the public square. And she didn't agree with that. Well, she ruled, so she upheld the board's original decision, overturning the BC Supreme Court. The decision allowed all arguments to be made in the public square and left it to the democratic process to decide the outcome. This is clearly inclusive secular. So she was using the inclusive secular model in making her decision. Everybody has a right to speak, even if it's for religious grounds, and leave it up to the democratic process, so it happened. So she was supporting this rule. That got appealed to the BC, not to the Canadian Supreme Court. A panel of 3 Supreme Court judges heard the case and made its decision overruling the BC Court of Appeal. The reasoning is that Chief Justice McLean's reasoning appears to fit the negative secular type. She argued that a requirement of secularism implies that, although the board is indeed free to address the religious concerns of parents, it must be sure to do so in a manner that gives equal recognition and respect to other members of the community. So he felt that the Surrey School Board had not done that, because the gay and lesbian community had effectively been included in the decision. So she was ruling in favor of inclusion, including those groups. Justice LaBelle, who was also a member of the panel, had a concurring minority position, which was also negative secular in its rationale. He said that Justice Sanders had gone too far. This is the Supreme Court judge, the Court of Appeals judge, had gone too far in saying that there is no place for religious views in the public square. Rather, it is only religious views that are intolerant of others that cannot be countenanced by the board, and certainly cannot be a basis for a policy decision. That was a negative secular position that she took. Justice Gonthier, this is the third one, dissented from that majority opinion. And the reason here is that the key is that people will disagree about important issues, and such disagreement, where it does not imperil community living, must be capable of being accommodated at the core of modern pluralism. And she agreed with Justice Mackenzie with reasoning, and that therefore his argument, fits with the inclusive secular paradigm. So the reason I gave all this is because it is a challenge, even in the legal profession, to come to a common understanding of what the secular society, or at least the secular state, really requires of its members, in particular of bodies that are charged with making public decisions, public bodies that are charged with making decisions about what should or should not be taken into account when you're making a decision. So it's a complicated case, as you can see, with varying opinions on it, right up the judicial chain, all over the Supreme Court, was finally decided on including divorce. So that I found to be quite an interesting example of some of the challenges of trying to define what you mean by a secular state. It's not that straightforward. And different members, and I've heard people in the past in this congregation express a variety of views on this. There's one body that would prefer if it were neutrally secular. Neutral secular, namely to keep the state and religion totally separated. even to the point of removing all these tax grants. I've heard that opinion expressed here. There are others that seem to be more generous in allowing opinions based on one's religion to be stated in the public forum. We have done this ourselves in petitioning to the Supreme Court of Canada on issues, on certain issues. And every religion should be free to do that. Doesn't mean you have to, you're going to be, people are going to agree with you, but you have the right to do that. And another article that I read argues that when that happens, it's okay. But when the decision has to be made, it must do so on rational grounds. You cannot make it purely, if you base your argument purely on religious grounds, it may not work. But if you base it, if you have a rationale that is can be based on the public perception of how a decision should be made, that's a different story. So those are some of the challenges. But what I really wanted you to think about today is not so much that, except that it's nice to have that as a background material, I think. But rather, what are people's perceptions as to what our secular society is like? What are its characteristics? What does it look like? And how do we, as a church, relate to that secular society? Are there things in that secular society that we agree with? Secular values, practices, actions, attitudes? Are there things that we still find problematic? And so I'm going to invite you to think about that. Well, I'm going to start off that part of the discussion with two views, one of which will not surprise you, one of which may. The first one, in terms of a religious leader looking at the broader society and making some judgments about it. That one I'm going to quote from the Bible, going all the way back 2,000 years to the Apostle Paul in his letter to the Romans. And I'm going to read that for you. Paul, of course, did all of his work in the more or less Greek-speaking part of the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, and so, of course, he was very familiar with the society in which he worked. He himself was not born in Israel. He was born in Tarsus, outside of Israel, within that Greco-Roman society. So he was used to that society right from his birth on. And so his comments are likely reflective of his views toward the larger society. And here's what he had to say, quoting from Romans chapter 1, verses 28 to 32. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. Notice he's making a connection here between lack of belief in God and all the things that follow from that. Right? In his view. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. Although they know God's righteous decrees that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. So that was Paul's view of the society in which he lived. Now, of course, the idea of secular society did not exist in his day, but still, the idea is he was looking around at his society and making judgments about it. So it was very definite judgments. So now what I want to do is to read another article from a different, at least an excerpt, not from the Bible this time, but from Karen Armstrong's The Battle for God. And I'm going to quote here, and this was produced in 1983, 2,000 years after Paul. This is the definition of secular humanism, which, in the view of the writer, was characteristic of the larger society. He said that the secular humanist denies the deity, listen to the parallels with Paul here, denies the deity of God, the inspiration of the Bible, and the divinity of Jesus Christ. It denies the existence of the soul, life after death, salvation and heaven, damnation and hell. It denies the biblical account of creation. It believes there are no absolutes, no right, no wrong, that moral values are self-determined and situational. Do your own thing so long as it does not harm anyone else. It believes in the removal of distinctive roles of male and female. It believes in sexual freedom between consenting individuals, regardless of age, including premarital sex, homosexuality, lesbianism, and incest. It believes in the right to abortion, euthanasia, and suicide. It believes in the equal distribution of America's wealth to reduce poverty and bring about equality. That's a bad thing. It believes in control of the environment, control of energy, and its limitation. And it believes in the removal of American patriotism and the free enterprise system, disarmament, and the creation of a one-world socialist government. This is a religious fundamentalist idea of the larger society.
I thought it was Karen Armstrong.
No, that's not her. She's quoting from a fundamentalist perspective on what they perceive as secular humanist society. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this particular list, in addition to the comparisons with Paul, and they're somewhat similar in many cases, is that this list was actually drawn from, seems to have been compiled from the first and second manifestos of the American Humanist Society, 1933 and 1973. Notice they've taken some of those manifesto elements and given them a particular twist to make what they obviously consider to be very positive statements into very negative ones. So the question then is, what are your views about our larger society? Is there anything on this last list that you would actually agree with? Or something that I would agree with, and not regard it as being bad? We already have legislation now, in effect, for permitting assisted suicide in this country. Abortion is a fairly widespread practice, and there's no legal restraints on that. And a number of other things on this list that we now pretty much take for granted. There are other things on the list that we would really raise our eyebrows about. The notion of sexual freedom, for example. I don't know where they got incest to put on the list, but they describe it as something that humanists would be in favor of. Where they got that from, God only knows. So it's a rather biased presentation. So the real question here for today's discussion is, what are your views about our secular? We do live in a secular society, and it tends to be inclusive secular, by the way, for the most part. And a couple of other authors I've read agree with that as well. So that being the case, and given everything that happens in our largely secular society these days, what are the things that you agree are good things about it? What are the things that you still find objectionable about it? And as a church, how do we respond to our larger society? So that's the question for discussion. At least that's the main one. You may have your own statement you wish to make. Now, on the advice of Malcolm, we're going to once again abandon the microphone, and we'll pick up what we can. I will ask you to speak up, and if any of you are particularly soft-spoken, I will try to summarize what you will have said to make sure everybody hears it. Okay? We'll try that. Okay. The floor is open.
I have a question before we begin.
Yes.
Where does France fit in?
France fits in mostly on the neutral secular side. More so than here in Canada or even in the U.S. They take a rather extreme position on keeping religion and the state as secular as possible. They recently lost a court case in France regarding the wearing of religious beachwear by Muslim women. That's just very recent, so they've lost that case. except the mayor of Corsica is going to refuse to listen to it. So I heard. It's extremely controversial there. Okay, so questions, comments, ideas, and suggestions. The floor is yours. The secular society, our society.
Right, it says here you must not support religion in any way. If we're talking about France, don't they support the Roman Catholic Church?
No, they do not.
Oh,
And that's true since the time of the French Revolution. They do not support it. It is not a recognized church.
Excuse me, what was the question?
The question was, what about Roman Catholicism in France? And I was pointing out that that is not an officially recognized religion in France. They do not recognize any religion. In fact, there was a very strong, at the time of the French Revolution, for that matter, even before that, the time of the Enlightenment, there was a very strong anti-clerical trend in French society at that point.
I'd like to, another question though, in terms of Canada. Quebec has its own law, civil law, I believe. And for many years, as we know, Quebec was dominated by the Catholic Church. And how has Quebec evolved with the rest of Canada, or the rest of Canada evolved with Quebec? Is this, I'm just intrigued now that we've raised this issue.
That's a very valid question, and in fact, Quebec operates under what is called Napoleonic law, whereas the rest of Canada operates under the more British common law system, now developed further in terms of constitutional law, particularly through the Bill of Rights that we have now in our Constitution. So they have in Quebec, it certainly moved a long way from where they were, say, in the 1950s, under Duplessis, for example. And the Catholic Church has pretty much lost most of its influence in terms of the formation of Quebec policy and politics and so forth. So they've really changed significantly since that period of time. The church has pretty much lost. It used to be that in Quebec, the parish priest would tell his parishioners how to vote in provincial elections and national elections. I mean, it was that blatant. And they were expected to obey what the priest said, of course. Nowadays, no priest in Quebec would dare to try to do that. Okay, comments?
Canada, I see we fit inclusive secular quite well. However, underneath everything, there is a strong Christian background in this country, and that annoys some people very much. It is a heritage of ours, and it comes up in so many different ways. And up in our Canadian literature, for example.
Yes, historically we've had a very strong Christian tradition in this country. Unlike the U.S., however, the main forces in this country have been more or less mainstream Protestantism and Catholicism. But the largest single denomination in Canada is Roman Catholic. However, all these religions have lost considerable ground in terms of how the public has worked through their own ideas as to religious values. And now there's a significant portion of the Canadian population, especially in British Columbia, which on census forms under the box called religion will list none. But when asked if they are still spiritual, a significant portion of them will say yes. So spiritual, but not religious, is a growing category in our population right now. However, you're quite correct to point out that what might be called vestigial part of our history is still there, and it still shows in many of our institutions. It shows in our Pledge of Allegiance. It shows in O Canada. It shows a variety of different ways. Back in citizen court, when I became Canadian, there was a table up front where you could have your selection of Bibles on which you could base you pledge your oath of allegiance to the Queen. I remember that distinctly. I think that's changed a little bit now so that you can give a civil response rather than putting your hand on any of the Bibles if you prefer to do that. So that's involved a little bit. Okay, so what I've heard, so one of the things you can say about Canadian society generally is that it is becoming more and more pluralistic. We have significant populations, Hindu populations, we have significant, not quite as significant, but it's growing, Muslim populations in this country. We've long had Jewish populations in this country. We have various kinds of Protestantism in this country. So it's become much more diverse in this country right now. And part of the challenge is to figure out how we can accommodate each other. So we talk a great deal about tolerance. Now I have given a whole separate Theologians Café on the subject of tolerance all by itself. But it does indicate the struggle that we have as a society to accommodate different religious points of view, particularly as it matters to public policy. To do so in a way that does not favor any one particular religious point of view, however. But you're right about the inclusive society. We do now give the right to speak from a religious perspective, but you have to understand if you're going to do that, people are not necessarily going to listen to your religious perspective if it is solely, say, biblical. You have to give a good, solid, rational defense of your position if you want your voice really to be heard, not just listened to. Okay, so one of the characteristics of our modern society is pluralism and tolerance, whatever we may mean by tolerance. So that's one of the characteristics. What else?
I'm going to put our visitors on the spot. I'd love to hear what you have to say, how it is in the United States. I know that the coins say, "In God we trust," but I wonder which God it is these days. And if you have a comment.
I think it's a fundamentalist Christian God. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Well, yeah, the American perspective of where religion fits into your government, whatever.
I think that would vary a lot by the state. Massachusetts is the first or second most Roman Catholic state in the country. And what I've been told by ministers is that more people actually attend church service of one kind or another in the United States than especially Europe. I don't know how it compares to Canada. But Massachusetts has, we were only getting rid of what we call the blue laws in the last 20 or 30 years. It used to be that stores could not open on Sunday at all. It was a day of reflection. It was a day of family. It was a day of going to church. And the stores could not open at all. And, that has been, gradually gotten rid of. There's still, the stores can't open before noon on Sundays. Churches are tax exempt. Zoning laws don't apply to churches. As long as it's a church, they can pretty much do what they want with that property, which wouldn't be the case in other institutions. So it's quite interesting to think about this in how it goes, and so certainly probably 4 might be a more description of the U.S. When we had a ballot question in Massachusetts on assisted suicide, the Roman Catholic Church poured a ton of money against it and turned the question around, so it failed. in Massachusetts. Not by much, but it failed. So churches are very actively involved in politics, probably in most states on it. So I guess 4 would be a good category for most of the U.S. If, like I said, it varies a lot by state.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Other comments about our present society? Things that you would agree on, things that you disagree about. I mean, I can think of half a dozen things right off the top of my head, but I'd rather you suggest them than me.
I'm back to number 4. The widest involvement of different faith groups, including non-religious. I just want to comment on the fact that the RCMP now will allow the headscarf for women, as they want to encourage Muslim women to join the RCMP. Isn't it odd that there's so much objection to that? After all, we fought the turban issue long ago, and the Sikhs can wear their turban. Now, why would we be so unhappy about the headscarf? Is it connected with religion, or is it connected with women? Or what's it about? Has anybody an explanation?
Well, I'm not a sociologist, so I can't really answer that question, but I do remember the debate concerning the turbans, and it was quite a strong debate at the time. And the idea was many of the objections were based not so much on religion as well, they were partially based on religion. So one catered to one's religion, even if that meant departing from the rules and customs and traditions of an institution like the RCMP. So there was a great deal of debate at that time. My feeling, and I've seen some examples of those headscarves, my personal feelings, that's all it is, my personal view on that, is that that'll go away too fairly quickly. We're not talking about putting something across your face, no, just the headscarves. And I can't see that in the long term that's going to upset too many people once they get used to the idea. But that's a personal perspective on it.
Well, I was just going to raise a slightly different comment, and that is that my understanding of the Unitarian Church is that its roots are basically in the Christian tradition. Is that not correct? Yes, we go back many centuries of change. And many of our problems have been related to becoming a large tent in which it's hoped that people can live in a peaceable way, but that it has attracted, of course, a strong, now I hesitate to say humanist, because of course Karen Armstrong's list that she brought forth from the other side. And I think it creates problems of living together. But of course, other Christian churches are falling into this too. I believe the United Church now has become far more inclusive and is acknowledging the that they will happily accept attendees, I'm not sure about membership, who do not espouse the traditional United Church Christian principles. And I guess evolving out of that are many of our religions evolving very quickly so as to bring in more beliefs. Do you see where I'm going with this, John? That we are in a period of rather rapid change.
I think it's very interesting you raise that example with the United Church, and to a lesser extent with the Anglican Church these days as well. The changes are very painful in some cases, like for the Anglicans, for example. Everything, not only for gay marriages, gay lesbian marriages, but also for women priests and women bishops, even, which is not in the larger worldwide Anglican community by any means accepted. But in Canada and in the US, it's getting a little bit more acceptable, but still very controversial. We've had Anglican congregations in New Westminster that have split on these issues. Then the real problem comes up is who gets the church, which side. States hate to get into that kind of a debate. They're asking them to choose sides. They really hate to have that kind of a jurisdictional issue. But it does illustrate something related to the main theme for today's discussion, and that is the proper relationship between church and the secular society. As mainstream churches continue to lose membership, the question arises, well, what do we do to something we're missing here? Simply to hang on to the stuff that we've always done without planning isn't working anymore. So we need to, what do we need to do? What do we need to change to keep people involved with the church, in this case, the United Church, let's say. So they are indeed becoming far more open to different points of view than they were in the past. Remember that there's been a United Church minister just recently who is openly atheistic. And that has produced some very awkward situations for the United Church of how we're going to deal with that. That's the Toronto one, that's correct. So yes, there's definitely breaches in these old walls. But these kinds of churches, these kinds of changes that are occurring and that are becoming more acceptable in places like the United Church and, as I said, to a lesser degree in the Anglican Church, are railed against from the more conservative churches, and particularly from the fundamentalists, who views these tendencies, these trends, as being giving in to an unholy secular society and diluting the true message of God. So they really take strong exception to that kind of position. So yes, there is a general practice in some churches to accommodate. And the question is, how far should accommodation go? Now we're sort of at the extreme wing of this, right? As a liberal religion, to the point where we're not even sure we want to call ourselves a religion in some cases. So certainly for us, in terms of our relationship to the larger society, I think we've long accepted many of the things that these other churches are still struggling with. And it's become just part of who we are. Though I'm not sure we're quite always as tolerant as we like to think we are in many cases. It's still something of a work in progress.
One of the things that I mentioned before, the blue laws in Massachusetts, and stores had to be closed, and Sundays were a day of rest and things like that. And when you go too secular or very secular, maybe the first, what does it get replaced by? And as far as I can see, it gets replaced by commercialism. Becomes sort of the new God. Because now, Sunday is not a day of rest and family and all this. It's another day to go shopping. And I don't know the answer to all this, because if the state supported a day of rest, is it a day of Sunday, or is it Saturday, or is it Friday? So you get all kinds of differentiation. So I don't know the answer to it, but like I said, if secular goes too far, what God are you replacing it with? And in a lot of cases, the God is a God of commercialism and things. So that's the question. I don't know what the answer is.
Sunday mornings is also the God of soccer games, which is one of the main reasons why we have problems with attendance on Sunday mornings by parents. That's all the soccer games, particularly the women's soccer games, girls' soccer games tend to begin scheduled. Well, you raise an excellent question. What has replaced the sacredness of a Sunday morning, so to speak? And the God of commercialism is what you pointed out. And I think that's true. That's one of the characteristics, I think you could say, of modern society, is that it has become a great deal more emphasis on material gain, on self-aggrandizement, self-promotion, but maybe slightly more so in the States than in Canada, but you certainly see that on both sides of the border. Although we are a more tolerant society, generally speaking, we're also a much less religious society, much less even spiritual society in many cases. So therefore, what are we becoming? What have we already become? Have we gone too far? And what should our future look like? This is a struggle that we in this church are engaged in right now with our commission on the future, to re-examine and round up what we as a church, or whatever we're going to call ourselves in the future, should be like. What should we be doing? What should we be espousing? What should Sunday morning look like? Should it always be Sunday morning necessarily? So these are all questions that we are actively engaged in right now. They are good questions. And the question is, are we doing this to accommodate? Well, yes, to a certain extent we are. Are we doing this to try to attract the spiritual but non-religious group? Yes, we are. Are we trying to do something which is more attractive to younger people, young adults? Yes, we are. What is it we need to change? What is it we need to hang on to? These are the struggles that we are facing as Unitarians right now, and not just us, but other congregations are struggling as well. Some of you may know this already, but our new ministers, when they met with us on the Sunday Services Committee, when they were still candidating, pointed out that, said to us that they had applied to a number of different congregations, of course, and there's one that they had applied to. And this congregation was, I think it was a suburban congregation, and that community was undergoing some rapid demographic changes. And they asked their search committee, well, what changes are you considering on doing yourself to accommodate your changing demographics? And they said, oh no, we're very happy with the way things are going right now, we're just going to stick with that. That turned them right off, right away. And one of the things they liked about us, that we seem to be a congregation that is prepared to face the question. That's one of the reasons we wound up being first on the list. But the challenge is there. What is it in our society we want to accommodate or take into account in order to be more attractive to certain people that we ought to be serving but are not at the present time? And what is it we need to retain? Are there differences? Are there generational differences here? And if so, how do we accommodate both? It's going to be the ongoing challenge that we face as a church. Other comments?
Let me try again.
As you were talking, I was reflecting upon the generational gap, and interestingly, my female cousin in California has just been ordained as a bishop in the Free American Anglican Church. Her congregation split away, and she is now a lady bishop. But I was reflecting upon my grandchildren, ones out here, who are totally without any form of religion, partly because my daughter-in-law, a lovely woman, was brought up in the Catholic Church and thus has a very distinct aversion to anything, and I think some people in our church will understand that the Catholic Church has had a way of turning some people completely off religion and wanting to protect their children from it. But I really think that this is a major mandate of getting younger people. We've got to get, and one of my thoughts is our church needs to become part of our greater community of North Vancouver. We have to be far more visible as people who practice a certain code of morals, ethics, beliefs, spirituality, whatever. And I think outreach in the community, becoming not inwardly looking, what are our inner problems here, but becoming very outward and visible. Does that make sense?
comments? I'm having a little difficulty, personal difficulty, because of my hard of hearing and poor memory. But that's what I want to say is that our church has two sets of statements. I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, the mission and the principles.
Yeah,
We have the mission statement
and
and the statement of Unitarian Universalist principles.
yeah, which are very accommodating and really express what I think we're about. I don't know that we can improve on those statements. We're not holding anybody back. We're not. We're being caring about the planet and the people on it and the other creatures on it. I think we're doing well on it by following those.
Thank you, sir. I totally agree about outreach. I do a lot of volunteer work with different groups, women's centers and stuff. And I should be more vocal about saying I'm a Unitarian. And because people say, why do you volunteer so much? And I say, I believe it's the rent we pay for living on this earth. But I should say it's part of my Unitarian duties instead of my Christian duty, right? I love that expression, Christian duty, but I can't use it all the time. I say it's my sort of Christian duty.
Yeah. But outreach is huge. That's what's going to do it.
Yeah, we keep our light very well hidden under the bushel, so to speak. We're very good at that because we don't want to stand out. I don't know what the reason is, but when I was still working at the college, at Quantum University College, which is what they are now, Quantum University, I always wore my pin. When I was wearing a suit, which was most of the time, I always had the Unitarian pin on my lapel. I made no secret about what my religion was. So that's one way to do it. Don't be too reluctant to say who you are. And then they may raise a few eyebrows and they ask the question, well, what does that mean? Sometimes. But it's surprising how many people do know what it means out there. At least they have some sense of what it means. It's not a completely strange term to them. But the reactions you get are kind of interesting. I've never yet to run into any really negative reactions, personally speaking. But let's not keep that light under the bushel. If it's something that really motivates, if it's our religious principles, which are really motivating us to do something, let people know. This is what's motivating me. This is why I do this. And that's one way we can get out into the community. Nearly everybody I know is involved in some kind of volunteer activity to varying degrees, quite a bit. And there's no reason why you can't simply say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it. And there's no reason to feel shy about it. Some people may feel shy because they're asked, well, what's a Unitarian? I'm not quite sure how to answer that. That may be part of the problem.
I always tell people it's the Church of Social Justice, and then they understand completely what that means.
That's a good way to deal with that, particularly dealing with why do you volunteer. Yeah. Okay, characteristics of our society that we agree to, I think, are ones that we have an interesting way this list is starting to build up a little bit. We've heard that we are more pluralistic, more tolerant. On one hand, those are good things, more prepared to accommodate after some serious reflection on to some of the characteristics of our society. The fact that the young people are so involved in other things these days, and how do we bring them in is a really good operating question. There are some things about our present society we're not too happy about. The emphasis on commercialism, on personal gain, on making as much money as you can possibly make, in some cases, on the disparity between rich and poor, which has been growing both in the U.S. and Canada, is an issue. The lack of tolerance in many places, that is still going to be an issue and still a problem. We like to be very pleased about what's happened legislation-wise in terms of gay rights. There are certainly pockets within our society that are strongly opposed, sometimes violently opposed. And so there is still an issue there. Our problems with our native peoples is a big issue. And the injustices that we've done to that part of our population is a major issue right now that our society is not something we're terribly proud of in our society. So there are characteristics of our society which we admire and like. There are other characteristics that we wince on, and rightfully so. So how we accommodate all this is the real challenge. What do we agree with? This is the question that got raised a couple of times ago. What is it in our society that we like, that we feel we can safely accommodate? Which are the parts that we will, where do we draw, what lines are we going to draw on that? So these are all issues, good issues. Anything else?
I'm curious, how does the Unitarian Church regard the writings of the Christian Bible versus the writings of the Quran or other religions like Buddhism, Hinduism?
Our statement of principles says that we can learn from all these traditions. What we do in actual practice remains a challenge. We sometimes, we look to our great hymnals, you'll see there are passages there, the songs there, sometimes sayings there, drawn from a variety of religious sources, which is good. But we tend to take the attitude sometimes that any of these influences and thinking, ways of thinking and practices are good, but we wince at the Christian ones still. We haven't really crossed that barrier. We quote from the Bible with considerable care. Okay? I quoted Paul today. I've done an entire service on the book of Ecclesiastes, which some of you may recall. But how we and when we use the Bible is it has to be done carefully, lest we antagonize a significant part of our congregation. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I'm saying in practice, we have a ways to go. We haven't really been as accommodating and as open. I think there's marvelous stuff. As many of you know, I took courses at the Vancouver School of Theology a couple of years back, and I found these immensely valuable in a whole different set of ways. But one of the ways is that there's a tremendous amount of beauty, in particularly in the Old Testament passages. Look to the book of Psalms, it's beautiful stuff in there. And there's no reason why we can't use some of that in our services. There's really nice stuff there. And it's not all theologically objectionable either. These are things which are really reflect on the human condition. There's no reason why we can't be using some of that material more than we do now. I'm still trying to think of ways in which I can use the Bible. Those are times when I'm actually in the pulpit. Some other stories from the Bible that I couldn't also use. There's some glorious stuff in there. So I'm not as prepared to sort of dump the whole thing because it might upset some people. But we do need some care and attention how we approach it.
Thinking, we have some people in our congregation who have strong Buddhist leanings. There seems to be a connection. And then looking back, we had a minister who was a Jew, became Unitarian, and then became Baha'i. And then we had a minister who was a Baha'i and became Unitarian. And one minister who asked, am I allowed to use the God word in this church? And we're an interesting mixed up bunch.
That is for sure. We have a real combination of theists. We have, I'm a theist myself. We have the very strong humanist element in our group who cringe at God as a cringe word. For that matter, church is sometimes a cringe word as well for them. We also have people who are significant believers in reincarnation in our congregation. We have those who are influenced by much of the Buddhist tradition, take value in some of the Buddhist practices and exercises and so forth. We have those who still value, though quietly, some of their Christian heritage, which they bring into the church. And we haven't done a very good job of accommodating that. But there's still work to be done. So we do have a variety of things, and they all have their place. At least we say they all have their place, so we need to continue to work on making sure that's the case.